Hope he's
I
doing
think he,
well.
I think he might just watch. So I'm
Okay,
glad about that. But he's doing so much better. And
good.
we're actually rolling now, but we're up in, I'm going to take it to a minute. So we got 30 seconds. Here we go. Ba, 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 ba. And David, I just need you to lay this all out for us because you have been talking about this for so long. And my father called me because I sent him the show. And he said you need to go to Texas just so that you know that.
Well, let's do it. Uh,
Okay. He said
they,
you really need to go. Well, wherever they're going to be, that's
yeah, if I could be of any use, of course.
yeah, because they need to. Okay, so we're coming up in 5. Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Please meet me on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. We've got some breaking news here on X at Santita J and on Blue Sky, santitajackson.bsky.social. Of course, Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Everybody come on in. Bernadette, Carol, Soskin. Come on in, everybody. Come on in and like and subscribe and share the show. It just broke that as we're talking about the redistricting in Texas, that could yield 3 to 5 more Republican seats for the Republicans. Uh, the Texas Democrats, our dear friend, um, uh, Ron Reynolds, who's the Texas state representative, who is the chair of the Black Legislative Caucus, he and the Democrats are going to flee the state. Now, you know, when they did that in 2021, they were threatened with arrest. And they don't make any money from this job, really. So they're putting the jobs where they actually work and provide for their families, they're putting all of this at risk. Because if the redistricting goes through, Jasmine Crockett's seat is imperiled. Al Green's seat is imperiled. You've got some progressives who are Hispanic. Their seats are imperiled. There's a lot that's at risk here. And so, in order to deny the governor and the White House this quorum, because the governor is working in lockstep with the White House, they're going to flee the state. That news literally just broke within the past 30 minutes or so. And so we're going to see how this all plays out. We're hoping to get Ron Reynolds on, but he was on his way to the meeting when he called me to tell me off the record that this is what was going to happen. So we're going to see what all this means. But first of all, let's go back because we have the census and we encourage people to report in the census because that's how you decide who's in the country, how we get representation, right? So now, okay, you find out who's in the country, and that is when they redraw the districts. Now, something really rare is happening. The White House and the governor of who they are working with the governor of Texas to do something in the middle of, there's no census yet. We got 4 more years for that, everybody. In the middle of, the decade, they're going to redraw the district. Now, mind you, they had been called into a special session because of these horrific floods that we had during the 4th of July weekend. The Guadalupe River rose, it's just unbelievable. It's 26 feet, David Daley, Attorney Darrell Jones, 26 feet. They had been denied $1 million, David Daley, for an emergency alert system. $1 million. They'd been denied that. So when you think of that horror, of course, everybody, they had a special session, they had to go there. But what they snuck into the special session was the plan to redistrict, to perhaps make it much harder for Al Green to win his seat, for Jasmine Crockett to secure her seat and others. A plot to get 3 to 5 more members of Congress who are Republican from the great state of Texas. And mind you, it's not going to stop in Texas. Texas is the beginning, everybody. So we need to talk about that right now, right now. And we're going to look at what's going to happen with these Democrats as they seek to deny the governor quorum. You know, if you don't have enough people seated, they can't vote on it. So we'll see how this goes. And with what's happening in America now, this is not 2021, this is 2025. When you go to these town hall meetings, you see that Americans are demanding that their representatives stand up for them. Part of the break that you're seeing it with President Trump's base is that they thought he was going to be that guy, and they're seeing that he's not at the end of the day. You got to be very, very careful. I don't care who you are. That crowd can turn on you. Cheers can turn to jeers on a dime. Attorney Darrell Jones, chair of the Transformative Justice Coalition, of course, host of his show, along with Attorney Barbara Arnwine on WOL in D.C., 12 noon every Tuesday. Please tune in, everybody. But we've got David Daley, senior fellow, Fair Vote. You got to get this trilogy of books. I mean, the title of this New York Times bestseller is something that tickles my father pink to this day. Rat effed. Why your vote doesn't count. But it's a trilogy of books, everybody. It is a trilogy. It is a trilogy. And you want to go from Rat effed, that's the name of that book, to Unrigged. Unrigged, how Americans are battling back to save our democracy, because I think that's where we are now. And then Anti-Democratic, this 50-year plot to overtake the courts. Because of course President Trump is using the courts to gut the republic, quite frankly. So let's go back to this redistricting and just tell me what is going on, David Daley, and how rare is it to have the districts redrawn in the middle of the decade?
It's very unusual. It happens in Texas once in a while, but it's very unusual to happen for the rest of the nation. We usually do redistricting every 10 years after the census, as you laid out. It means I'm only of interest to talk to people for a couple of months in years that end in one, right? And yet here we are again because of what Republicans are doing. This is an audacious, aggressive power grab, pure partisanship in the state of Texas, looking to add on to the very slim Republican majority in the U.S. House. It is 3 seats as we head towards the 2026 midterms. We all know what usually happens in a midterm election. The party in power usually loses seats. Happened to Barack Obama in 2010. It happened to Donald Trump in 2018. This is pretty commonplace. And what Trump is doing really is using redistricting as an insurance policy against the voters. And if they can steal somewhere between 3 and 5 seats in Texas simply by moving the district lines around, packing communities of color, Black and brown communities in the state of Texas, around Houston, around Dallas and South Texas, wiping out some competitive seats down in South Texas, you can double right there the Republican margin as you head into the midterms. And as you said, it will not stop there. They will move on to Ohio in the fall, where there are 2 more seats just waiting to be snagged. Then they will move on to Missouri.
So just before, as you go on, you're saying that this is part of the plan.
Yes.
That they have targeted states where they see some vulnerabilities, and that's where they're going.
They are going to maximize their maps in every state where they hold power. The party in power in states is usually the party that can draw the district lines, because a map is like any other piece of legislation in the state of Texas and in other places. So if you have the ability to draw the map, you have the ability to pick winners and losers. And so you take a state like Texas, which right now 25 Republicans, 13 Democrats in Congress, already deeply.
Good afternoon. Welcome aboard our flight.
Okay, we're gonna get.
That sounds like breaking news right there. That sounds like a flight bound for
We
someplace.
do. We don't. We don't know where Representative.
I'm glad
Reynolds
you
is.
muted it because I don't want to tell everybody where you're going. But this is already a deeply gerrymandered map in the state of Texas. They are looking to re-gerrymander it in the middle of the decade. It is highly unusual. It is at the orders of Donald Trump, who said, let's take 5 more seats in the state of Texas. And now Donald Trump realizes, well, there's also seats to be taken in Ohio, in Missouri, in Indiana, in Florida, North Carolina, in Kentucky, in New Hampshire. So this is going to continue. The U.S. Supreme Court could make this dramatically worse. They are going to hear a case this fall, the Calais case out of Louisiana, which is really about the Voting Rights Act and the constitutionality of majority-minority districts that exist in Louisiana and Alabama and South Carolina. If you were to squeeze those seats off the national congressional map, suddenly you're looking at a Republican plus 15 advantage, and that becomes a huge GOP boost before anyone has even cast a ballot.
We're talking with David Daley, senior fellow at Fair Vote, New York Times bestseller. You have got best-selling author. You have got to get the book Rat Effed, Why Your Vote Doesn't Count. You really need to go back to 2008. You can go back. You can go back further, but no, bring it forward, bring it forward, because people need to understand what happened. Just before I bring up Representative Reynolds, what happened the night that President Obama won?
Well, the night that Obama won, I think Americans around the country, including Democrats and Republicans, some of the smartest strategists on all sides, they thought that, you look at the coalition that came together that night to elect the nation's first Black president, and people thought that there was a rising coalition that was going to drive American politics for the next generation. And what Republicans realized was that as historic as the 2008 election was, the 2010 election could be much more consequential, because 2010 was a census year. And what do we do after the census is we redistrict. And so Republicans set out in 2010 very precisely, funded with, the tens of millions of dollars in dark money that they were able to collect after the Citizens United decision and that boost from the conservative court. And they set out to take control of state legislatures around the country, largely in purple states, in places like Pennsylvania and Ohio and Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Florida, Indiana, which at the time still had a Democratic chamber. And they targeted about 115 state legislative seats around the country. And by winning those seats and flipping those chambers, they had the power to draw maps in all of those states heading into the 2012 election. And in many of those states, the lines that they drew in 2012 have held their power for all of these years. So you look at the 2012 election, which is the first election that is held on these new maps. Democrats win the White House again, right? Barack Obama is reelected by almost the same margin that he wins in 2008. And not quite, but close. The Democrats gain seats in the U.S. Senate, but they cannot take the U.S. House back, even though they win the chamber by 1.4 million more votes. Republicans hold the chamber 234-201. And that is because if you look at the states that Republicans redrew after 2010, even though Obama won those states in 2012, right? Obama wins Ohio. Obama wins Florida. He wins Pennsylvania. He wins Virginia. He wins Wisconsin. But these states that Obama carries, that had been gerrymandered as a result of the GOP 2010 strategy, Republicans win 64 of 94 congressional seats, right? Yeah, they win 12 out of 16 in Ohio, 13 out of 18 in Pennsylvania, 5 out of 8 in Wisconsin, 9 out of 13 in North Carolina, even as they are losing these states. And that provides the margin for the Republicans to hold the House and to essentially stymie Barack Obama's second term the night that he's elected to it. So redistricting matters. It is about power. These lines that look so hidden really are about who wins and who loses, and how power is distributed and how it is held. And you can use these invisible lines to hold back majorities. And redistricting is one of the key reasons why we have Republican minority rule in so many parts of the country, and it's getting dramatically worse.
Wow. You know what, Attorney Darrell Jones, I'm going to bring up um, Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds, because the news just broke that that you all are about to flee, and who's fleeing? What is going on here? I'm not going to ask you where you're going, because the last time
Is it
when
Josie
I met you,
Garcia on
you
this
all were in
aircraft? If yes, please.
Washington
Okay, that's
D.C.
where we're at.
Oh, do you want me to, shall I mute you? Okay, so you're fleeing right now.
Yes,
Oh,
currently, like
okay.
in real time. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, let me go on. I don't. Okay, you're What does this mean? What are you doing?
So, so obviously,
Are you on a plane?
yes.
Okay, all right.
So, what I just want to say is everything that David said is absolutely correct. This is a time for people to make good trouble, to be on the right side of history, and to do everything that we need to do to fight to help preserve our democracy. And so, in the spirit of John Lewis and Reverend Jesse Jackson and Dr. King, Rosa Parks, Fannie Lou Hamer, and others, it is my firm belief that it is my responsibility to do whatever I have to do to stop this racial gerrymander, this Texas takeover from Trump and Abbott. We have to fight. We have to do everything we can. We have to use every tool in the toolbox to help preserve our black and brown Texans from being disenfranchised. And so, yes, we are breaking form in real time, and we will do everything we can to fight and do everything we can to help stop this authoritarianism that we see from these MAGA extremists that would do anything they can to cheat, steal. They would do anything they can to subvert our democracy. They would do anything they can so that they can choose their voters and not have the voters choose their elected officials. That is not a democracy. And so, yes, that is what I'm doing right now. So I have to sign off, but I wanted to be on, Santita, to thank you for this coverage because it's so important that people know transparency is key because they're trying to do everything they can to hide through misinformation and disinformation. So I look forward to further discussions with you upon my safe arrival. And
Okay.
like last time, we will definitely continue to be engaged so that we can really alert the American people about what's happening. And hopefully other people will join the brave Democrats that are with me as we have another quorum break. So I brought out my old shirt from before, from the last quorum break from 2021 today for a little bit of motivation. So Darryl, I see you smiling. That's how we met, man. We never would have met but for that quorum break back in 2021. So I just wanted to come on with a little bit of a breaking news. So thank
No, but
y'all.
thank you so much.
All
And
right,
what we will do when you land, please
got it.
contact, and we will get you back on so we can talk about this. But much love
Thank
to you.
you.
Give,
Okay,
give my
thank you.
love to
Thank
all
you.
your other
All right,
colleagues.
I will. Thank you.
Wow. Okay, that's breaking news, everybody. Well, I can't say it any more firmly than that because I said, well, where is he's on a plane? Didn't ask him where he was going because they really shouldn't tell us that right now. Daryl, why shouldn't they tell us?
Well, Santita, a large part of the reason they shouldn't tell you is because what Texas will do is that they will send the Texas state rangers and state troopers out to try to find them, to arrest them, and to bring them back to the House so that they can have the quorum and to vote. That's why they don't want you to know where they're going. That's why it's important that if they're going to do this break, they got to do the break and be quiet wherever it is that they go. Otherwise, they do stand the possibility of them being really brought back, whether in handcuffs or not, brought back to Austin and being forced into a vote, forced back into session.
And you know, we've seen with their governor that he doesn't mind going across state lines because he's been shipping
Right.
people, men, women, and children across state lines. That's something that Congressman Jonathan Jackson asked the Department of Justice to investigate. He said he's trafficking people because, you know, we've lost a lot of children and a lot of people have been brought into the United States and we don't know where they are. And we're beginning to see vis-a-vis Epstein that there's a lot of sickness, a lot of depraved people out here. And some of them are and many of them are the most respected, vaunted people in the world. And they are sick. And oh my gosh. But now we're seeing that these Texas Democrats are being forced to flee. What can take us back to 2021, if you would, Daryl Jones, because they were in Washington then, yes? Because I know that's where
Yes.
we saw them, and many of them, people don't know, they don't make much money as Texas state representatives at all. So they really do have other jobs, David Daly, you know this. And so
Right.
they're leaving these jobs behind. They're leaving their families behind. Because it is this serious. I mean, we're living in a time in which the big, beautiful bill was passed, everybody. $1 trillion was taken from your health care. They put a back door in Social Security so that it could be privatized, David Daly. These people, they're not playing with us. And so they're not playing. Because they also, as David Daly has shown us, the handwriting is on the wall. You're the ones who told us on Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson this morning, David Daly. You said, oh, no. We're looking at Ohio next. I mean, they have targeted certain states so that they can grow this majority. So what is this whole process of fleeing, Daryl? I mean, as you recall from 2021. And from the Wisconsinites who did this under their Republican governor who had gone too far.
Right. And, well, what happened in Texas in 2020 was coming off of the election, and we really had a lot of Democratic success. And what Texas decided to do was that they were going to change a lot of the voting procedures, a lot of access to voting, and they come up with these really restrictive bills in the Texas legislature. And that legislative bill that was endorsed by the governor there was going to make it very difficult for voters of color, young voters, to be able to have access and be able to vote. And so the Democrats that were in Texas in the state legislature were in the minority, but there were enough of them that it required them to be present in order for the legislature to have a quorum to be able to carry on its business. But by them fleeing, they no longer had the quorum so that the Texas legislature could operate. And so, we call them refugees because no one was supposed to know where they were, and they were gone, just leaving the state of Texas, and the state of Texas was trying to find them. They came, many of them, Representative Reynolds, at that point, Representative Jasmine Crockett, were among the ones that came to the District of Columbia in order to break that quorum so that there could not be a vote on those bills. Now, interestingly, we're in a similar position because now we still have something that involves now Congresswoman Crockett and Representative Reynolds and many of the other legislators that are there. And this time, of course, it also includes Congressman Al Green. So what the state representatives are doing is that they're trying to be certain that a quorum does not exist so that the legislature cannot vote on the legislation and the bills that are being introduced. That's in a nutshell what is happening. What the governor and what some of the law enforcement in Texas did previously, and I anticipate they'll do it again, is that they're going to try to locate them, they're going to try to find them, and they're going to try to arrest them and bring them back to the Texas legislature for them to be forced into session and to make the quorum so that they can put this legislation into place. That, in a nutshell, Santita, is what's going on with this.
David Daly, this is also, I think, part of the backdrop is when you look at these town hall meetings, there is an escalating tension in America today. And I think we need to acknowledge that. It's become verbally aggressive and verbally violent. And that precedes physical aggression and physical violence and more. I mean, because now we're seeing a desperation. Um, I mean, Americans are really feeling that they got a raw deal. Look, over the past 20 years, we got a black president because we said we got a raw deal. You know, we've been looking for some pretty radical change, David. And so, we've been, Americans, and I would say really Americans have been throwing everything at the wall just to see what will stick. You know, you saw the housing crisis at the beginning of the millennium. The economy has collapsed on us. And now we're seeing you cannot afford to buy a house. You cannot afford to rent an apartment. I mean, look, what happened in New York last week with the shooting at the Blackstone headquarters? What they have not told us in corporate media is that the first person who was killed was the CEO of their real estate trust. This is someone who's at the heart of unaffordable housing in the United States, Wesley LaPanter. It's worth tens of billions of dollars. She was not inconsequential. This shooter didn't go to the NFL. He went from killing her and the police officer to the 33rd floor to Rudin Management. They're the big real estate company in New York. So I don't know what corporate media are talking about. Maybe he was also upset. He was also upset with the NFL, but they were not his first targets, David. There's a lot going on here.
There's a lot going on in the country, and this is an effort, one of many efforts, to lock in political control and separate the people from their lawmakers. When you redistrict, you take power away from people and from voters. You take power away from communities. You take power away from communities of interest. And you lock in partisan control. You make the November election essentially meaningless in most places. And you shift all of the power to party primaries, which usually happen 4 or 5 months before the election. They tend to have very low turnout. They're closed to independents and only available for participation by folks who are already party members. Sometimes they have deadlines for registration of many months before the election because they don't want participation in those primaries. The goal is to have the most extreme elements of the base choose the winners in the party primaries, and then they move on to general elections that have already been predetermined for one side or the other. And when that is the case, lawmakers are relatively immune from whatever you and I think. So when you see in this country the vast disconnect between what people want in terms of public policy and what they get, whether that is on the economy, whether it's on healthcare, whether it's on minimum wage, whether it's on reproductive rights, whether it's on voting rights, whether it's on gun control, so much of this is because we can't change our lawmaking, even if we want to, at the most basic local level. The state representatives and the member of Congress, the folks who are supposed to be most accountable to us, are actually the least accountable to us. There were 37 districts in this country out of 435 that were within 5% in 2024. 37 of 435 were actually competitive races. That means all of the rest of those races were decided in party primaries by the tiniest number of people, sometimes just a fraction of a district. And then that winner goes on to the general that they cannot lose. Sometimes they can't lose because there's no challenger, because the other party says, we can't win in this district. Why even bother? So when we talk about this, we're not talking about something wonky or boring or esoteric. We're talking about the fundamental reasons why you feel your politics are so broken.
So do you get the sense that Americans feel shortchanged? I mean,
Oh,
is that,
absolutely.
talk to me about that, because I think that, you know, when we're having these discussions, David Daly and Attorney Daryl Jones, you got to have it within that context because people, I'm beginning to feel a desperation with Americans. And when that happens, desperate people resort to desperate measures.
We're trying to fix things, right? People are frustrated, and so we've seen the seesaw in our politics from one side to the other as frustrated voters look for a solution on the other side. And so you had 2016, and then you had 2018, and then you have 2020, and then you get 2024. But what's fundamentally broken in our politics goes much deeper than that. What's broken are these systems and institutions themselves. We can't make the fundamental change we want. All we can do is go sort of back and forth in a weird yo-yo form almost, right? But the change that we want to see is almost out of our grasp, because these institutions have been so fundamentally hijacked by partisans seeking power who will not let go of it, and by institutions that, like the U.S. Senate, for example, right? That's a 53-47 Republican advantage right now. Even though the last time Republican candidates actually won more votes for the U.S. Senate, you have to go back to 1994 for a 6-year cycle in which Republicans actually won more votes. But they've commanded the Senate for, probably half that time anyway. And they essentially command the Senate even when they don't have it, because of the way that the filibuster works and how hard it is to actually get anything through. When you look at how 2 Republican presidents in the last 24 years have won the White House without winning the popular vote because of the Electoral College, when you look at how those 2 presidents who won office without winning the popular vote appointed 5 of the 6 conservative justices to the ruling right-wing supermajority on the U.S. Supreme Court that has essentially transformed the court from a body of equal justice under the law to a right-wing super legislature appointed for life, without any review or ethics code or term limits on their own power. So all of these institutions, whether we're talking about the Senate, the House, redistricting in state legislatures and Congress, the courts, the Electoral College, they are all tilted in the direction of one-party conservative white minority rule.
So, but what did you make of? I was watching, I love watching these historical documentaries, and then I buy a whole cache of books behind them. And I've always been fascinated by the fact that George Washington, our first president, I've been fascinated by him. Yes, he was a slave owner. And so that is problematic. That having been said, and he did take their teeth and everything and put them in his own head. I mean, that's grotesque. Yes, it is true. But his wife did not wanted him to free the slaves, the enslaved people. On one level, she kind of acknowledged their humanity. She said they're not happy and they cannot like us. They cannot love us here. Don't leave them to me, George. But interestingly enough, what he also did was he warned us against the 2-party system, David Daly, as you recall from your reading of history, Daryl. He said this would result in tyranny. And he was the only president that we've had in our history who was not a member of any party. Do you think, and what do you make of that, David, before I pivot to you, Daryl? Because I see 2 wings of the same bird, right? I'm not saying that there are not philosophical differences between a Bernie Sanders and a Donald Trump. There certainly are, But as you said, I mean, I think Americans want a fundamental change in the system. I don't know if they can put if we can put our fingers on it. I don't know if we can really if we have language for it. But when you have healthcare that's being gutted, when the social compact is being shredded, that's not that doesn't bode well for any of us.
The conversations we're having in our politics are not the conversations that Americans need to have happen.
Okay.
And that is directly related to how we choose our representatives. Well, essentially related to how we don't choose our representatives, how they are chosen for us, and what little say we have in the process in so many places. I mean, I think if we want to fix this, we have to really think deeply and creatively about how to remake these structures and put voters actually back in charge. I mean, Jamie Raskin and Don Beyer have a terrific bill that they just reintroduced, the Fair Representation Act for the U.S. House, which would, in addition to barring things like mid-decade redistricting, would shift the U.S. House from 435 single-member districts to large multi-member districts that are elected with proportional ranked choice voting. You would eliminate the power of gerrymandering because you can't gerrymander these bigger, larger district lines. And then suddenly everybody's got a seat back at the table again, and the incentives become a little bit different. If every seat becomes a swing seat, and if any community that represents 25% plus one in any of these larger districts can win a seat at the table, suddenly lawmakers have to kind of sit down together. Suddenly you get a different breed of winner who's being seen in Washington and can maybe actually represent the people that they're sent to represent. But right now, these lawmakers represent a fraction of their district. They're not accountable to the whole district. They're accountable to the fraction of the fraction that can then beat them in a primary in a non-competitive district. And until we rework these incentives, things are going to stay broken.
Well, does gerrymandering, Daryl, undermine the whole principle of one man, one vote, one person, one vote?
In one short word, yes, it does, Santita. But the problem, I think, that that's encountered here, and yeah, the answer is yes. It clearly, the whole system of gerrymandering is meant to, once I'm in my seat, let me do all that I can to be certain that I have people that think and will vote for me, be the ones that are electing me or that are in my district and able to vote. That's what the whole gerrymandering thing is about. Get those that are against me away from me. Let's dilute their voting power. Let's put them and spread them. Let's crack them and crack up their districts and stack up their districts so that we can dilute their voting power. That's what gerrymandering is all built for. You know, what Dave was just laying out with regards to the proposal that is going to be introduced by one of our Maryland congressmen here. The problem they're going to encounter, I think, is this. If you're the party in power, why do you want to change anything? But what incentive is there for you to give up your power? What we're in the middle of right now is it's a power play. That's what this is. And I think that I think that Jimmy Raskin and all, I think their intentions are great. They're wonderful philosophical, well-reasoned, well-meaning individuals. But in the middle of this power play, I ain't giving up my power. And that's what it's going to encounter. They're going to encounter a president that's going to stand on the side of those who are in power, that's going to say, don't give up your power. Look what we're doing. Look where we are. We control the U.S. Supreme Court. We control the House of Representatives. We control the U.S. Senate. We control the presidency. Why would you want to give up your power? That's the question that's going to be posed. That's the issue that's being phrased here. One of the other things that Dave laid out, Santita, that both Barbara Arnwine and I have been going around the country. We formed a group talking about this. Is dealing with what's happening with the courts. And how does all of this factor in? Here's how this factors in. And I'm just using Texas now as the example. There is one federal judicial circuit, and the country is divided into 13 or so federal judicial circuits that listen to issues that come out of the states that are make up their cluster. There's one cluster of states that comes out of Missouri and North Dakota. And you heard Dave mention this, the Louisiana versus Calais case. And what that's dealing with is racial gerrymandering, if you will, and redistricting, and the courts forcing Louisiana and their legislature to change the districts to create another majority minority district, and that's fine. Right now, I just want to be clear on this Calais case. It's Louisiana, which is part of the district that also takes in Texas. This Calais case right now, all oral arguments and everything before the Supreme Court are on hold. On hold. Why are they on hold? I'll tell you why they're on hold. The Calais case is on hold because there are two cases that have come out of the Eighth Circuit, one being out of the state of Arkansas, the other being out of the state of North Dakota. The Arkansas case challenges whether or not a private right of action, whether or not a person has standing to even bring the case at all, to challenge that their voting rights have been impacted because of the legislature or any other reason. That's what it does. So in the Arkansas case, Arkansas versus the NAACP, the court there in the Eighth Circuit, the U.S. Court of Appeals, found that there was no right of standing for anyone other than the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, Department of Justice, to bring suits for violation of the Voting Rights Act of 65, Section 2. All right, that was an appeal. So that right now is standing law for those 7 states that make up Arkansas. There's still a glimmer of hope that was existing on what we call a 1983 action. The 1983 action would permit someone to have standing if they were impacted by the decision that's made by the federal statute in dealing with voting rights. In the case that just came through, is the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians. And what they did, and they were out of North Dakota, what they did was the same thing. They were being impacted by state legislation because redistricting lines that were drawn that diluted the voting power of Native Americans so that they could not elect representatives of their liking, of their choosing. They diluted their voting power. The court there, the same Eighth Circuit Court, said to the Chippewa Indians, y'all ain't got standing either under 1983. The only entity that can bring a violation of the Voting Rights Act is the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, and she ain't bringing it. So y'all, no, you don't get the chance to even argue if anything has happened. What has happened on that right now is that the Supreme Court has granted a stay in that case while they decide whether or not the Supreme Court wants to bring this North Dakota case up. You're asking me, why am I talking about North Dakota? We're talking about Texas. No. This is why. Because if the Supreme Court decides to hear the case, the Chippewa case, and they say there's no right of standing for anyone to argue violations of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, except for the U.S. Attorney General, then nobody will be able to bring cases other than Pam Bondi and her Civil Rights Division. That's the only entity. So then we head into Texas. And the question becomes, well, what does that mean for Texas? Well, it means that the courts would be cut off as a remedy for what the discriminatory acts that are occurring in Texas. The courts would not have the opportunity to litigate that unless President Trump's U.S. Attorney General, Pam Bondi, says this is a violation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and I want to file in this case, which is not going to happen. So I say all of this, Santita, to say that the fight that Representative Reynolds, the fight that all the representatives in Texas that are taking leave so there's not a quorum, this is really that I believe this will really be the front as to what happens across the country now with regards to folks being able to stand up and fight back with regards to their voting rights.
But see, I don't
this
think
is how you pin and mount the Voting Rights Act. This is how you paralyze the Voting Rights Act. Exactly. Under every administration other than the most progressive Democratic administrations. And it is contrary to the actual statutes. It is contrary to the actual language of the Voting Rights Act, which ever since 1965 has made it clear that there is a private right of action, because the folks who framed the Voting Rights Act understood that, they were passing the Voting Rights Act because the Civil Rights Acts of the late 1950s and early 1960s were not enough to actually create change. They needed this private right of action in order, because the Department of Justice could not be everywhere in every small community in which this was an issue. So the courts in this entire question play a key role. We keep talking about Donald Trump telling Texas, get me 5 more seats. All of this power grab is effectively made possible by John Roberts and the U.S. Supreme Court. John Roberts, who is not the Chief Justice of the United States. John Roberts is the most effective Republican political operative of the generation, if not longer. Roberts' life's mission has been to gut the Voting Rights Act. He is an institutionalist and an incrementalist, only in that he's gone very slowly to achieve his life's goal. He is on the verge of it. If you go back to what this court has done on this question, I would start in Texas in 2011. 2010, 2011, with the case that is the precursor to Shelby County. It's the Northwest Austin case that lays the groundwork for what the court does in Shelby County, where they end preclearance, the most effective enforcement mechanism of the Voting Rights Act. And they didn't get rid of preclearance. They just froze the formula. They did the same thing they're trying to do in Turtle Mountain. They're trying to paralyze it without actually saying that we are getting rid of it. We're just going to suffocate it in the crib. And that's what they're doing, piece after piece. So Shelby County comes along and they freeze the preclearance formula that would have required Texas to, among other things, pre-clear the maps that they're now drawing through either a court in Washington or the Department of Justice. They take that away. An hour later is when Texas goes ahead and enacts their draconian voter ID bill. John Roberts in his decision says, well, things have changed in the South. It took exactly 1 hour for us all to realize that things had not changed in the South. That was 12 years ago. John Roberts in that case says, well, we don't really need Section 5 because we still have Section 2. And then they go to work painstakingly over the course of the last decade trying to eviscerate Section 2 step by step by step.
Wait a minute. And we have a black president. Remember he said that. So America's fundamentally changed.
Right. Fundamentally changed. Things have changed in the South. And then there's this redistricting case, the crucial redistricting case from 2019, Common Cause versus Rucho out of North Carolina, which comes to the court at a time in which federal judges appointed by both parties have looked at extreme partisan gerrymanders drawn by both parties, by Democrats in Maryland and by Republicans in Ohio and Michigan and Wisconsin and North Carolina. And they've said, we have the tools to fix this. We know how to do it. And John Roberts and his 5-4 conservative majority at the time said, no, redistricting is a political issue. We are going to close the federal courts to this instead. And if politicians want to fix it, politicians can go ahead and fix it. Well, as Daryl just said, right? Politicians ain't going to fix this. So this is another classic John Roberts feint. And what he did here was he not only enabled the kind of partisan gerrymandering power grab that we saw after the 2021 election, he also effectively gutted the laws around racial gerrymandering without actually saying that that was what he was doing. Because when you say that partisan gerrymandering is non-justiciable, that's why all of these politicians, as they're drawing these maps, say, we're just doing this to maximize partisan advantage. We're not doing this to hurt communities of color in Dallas and Houston or South Texas. We're doing this to help Republicans win more seats. because they're putting on record, we're doing a partisan gerrymander, not a racial gerrymander. They're making it harder to prove racial gerrymanders. So all of this is coming together in this moment, which is why this moment is so important. This is a confluence of multiple streams that the right has been working to bring together through the courts and through the political system for some time. And here we are.
I think that's what your books show us. That, my father often says, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. They have had, my father said, the 54 board decision, the day that that decision came down, they started working on undoing public education in the United States of America. And that is how they work. And they don't stop until they have completed their task. The day that Roe v. Wade was decided, they started putting together a plan to undo it. I mean, David and Daryl, we have to really we have to understand that. We have to understand these people do not stop working. Not to mention the fact that, need I remind people, and many of us might not even be aware of this, it was only in June of 1924 that indigenous people became American citizens. This whole idea of citizenship and of being an American is a very tenuous thing. And everybody has not had full access to that franchise. Black people essentially became Americans, fully enfranchised Americans in 1965. And be very clear, that's Black people, that's indigenous people, but it's poor white folks too. That's coming. When you see your healthcare gutted, when you see when you have people who say, well, there are 8 billion people on earth now, when you have people who are running the world who's saying that, well, we really need 2 billion people on earth, what's going on? I'm not a conspiracist, everybody. Oh, I'm saying you need to listen to what everybody is saying. And when people tell you something, you need to believe them. You need to look at John Roberts' path. He was put on the path to get onto the Supreme Court and to be the Chief Justice long ago. And they don't stop. They don't stop. That's why I want you to get the book. I've told it up again, David. I'm not kidding. It's not funny. I'm very serious. Where are the other ones? Yes. Start there, everybody. And get Unrigged. Bring that up.
Oh, it's around here somewhere.
Okay, don't worry, because I have mine over here, but I'll go like this. I'll look crazy. But next time I'll just have mine up behind me. Never mind. I'm not going to think about you. I love you. But you need to read Rat F. You need to read Unrigged. You need to read Anti-Democratic. You need to understand it's not a smoky room. These people sit back and they look at where America is going and they decide, I want America to go in another way. Now we need you to get registered to vote. We need you to get active. It just came across the screen that the Texas Democrats are headed to Illinois. They will have a friendly governor here in J.B. Pritzker. And so, okay, and we've got Rainbow Push here and all of that. So, get ready to come on to Illinois, David Daley and Daryl Jones, because we're going to have to meet with them because they need strategies. And they need to know they need to talk with you, David Daley. They do. Because this is a real plan. And you know what? The good news is, what did Dr. King say? Evil men plot, therefore good men must plan. So now let's come together with our own plan. I don't feel hopeless at all. I'm excited that people are waking up. I'm excited. I've got one.
And I agree with you, Santita.
Before we go talk
Santita,
about
just very.
Yes.
Yeah, just very quickly. I wanted the listeners to remember that in 2021, 2022, Cliff Albright with Black Voters Matter and myself and Barbara Arnwine and others were sounding the horn saying we need the Freedom to Vote Act and the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act to pass Congress. Had those acts passed Congress, we would not be having this conversation today. And so when we think about the importance of who we vote for, you got to remember there were 2 senators that were part of the filibuster that held all of this up, and in Arizona and West Virginia that put them in place. That's how we end up where we are today, is because we did not have the ability to pass the Freedom to Vote Act and the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which has now recently been reintroduced. It demonstrates the importance of voting down ballot as well. We need to be certain that we're voting for state representatives that stand in our interests, because those are the ones that are going to make the determinations when it comes to redistricting in our areas. That's what I'm going to close on, Santita. We got to be certain that we register people to vote, and we get people to the polls to vote for people that are in our best interests.
And stop being sentimental in your politics. You should have pushed Joe Biden harder. That's the reality. No,
Agreed.
look, no, honey. This is a destination. It's not a date. This is not a love thing.
Yeah.
I need you to come through for me. This is what I need. I'm not talking about who I want. I'm talking about what I need. Okay? I don't eat dessert first. I eat my vegetables. My mother, when we went to McDonald's, my mother, oh my gosh, it was gross. She would make green peas when we got home. She said, you eat these first and you can have your McDonald's and your fries. It sounds crazy. Okay. But it worked. Chaparral Wells wants this from you, Dave. What is the step-by-step direction for Democrats? Give them their marching orders.
Marching orders are tough. You know, I wish I had them, and so if either of you have got better marching orders,
no, well then say what you want to say, because I think that's going to evolve.
The challenge here for Democrats when it comes to redistricting in Congress is that they've already maximized their gains in most of the states that they can do this. So everybody's like, fight back harder, and they're looking to, and Governor Pritzker in Illinois, and Governor Moore in Maryland, and Governor Murphy in New Jersey, and Governor Hochul in New York, and Newsom in California. They're all talking tough and flexing their muscles, but there's not a whole lot that they can do, either legally or practically. Illinois' got a 14-3 map. Can you draw a 15-2 map in Illinois? I don't know if you can. I think that could backfire. Maryland's got a 7-1 map. If they thought they could draw an 8-0 map in Maryland, they would have done so in 2011. They don't think that they can do it. The law in New York is not going to be fixable in time, and I doubt it can change in California. I don't think that the numbers are there for Democrats to fight what Republicans are doing effectively. So they're going to have to organize and really focus on the seats that they think they can flip, right? I feel like every couple of years there's like a hot, trendy candidate in a state that can't win, who gets on MSNBC a couple times, and then they get all kinds of, fancy dollars heading to them, or whoever's running against Marjorie Taylor Greene gets all kinds of millions of bucks sent to them because people want to think that they're doing something. You're not going to beat Marjorie Taylor Greene in that district, right? So you have to really focus super strategically on the eye of the needle and how to win the seats that are necessary to win, and be sure that those candidates have all the resources and volunteers and help that they need. But I think we also have to be starting to do the functional work of convincing people of the big structural reforms. And to me, that's the great loss of the Biden era. We need big structural fixes at the U.S. Supreme Court. We need a larger court, a more modernized court. We need to limit the jurisdiction of this court. We need an ethics code. We need term limits. There are really, and these are changes that, majorities of Americans back in many ways, but that the existing, a democratic power structure was not there yet. We have to move the Democratic Party to understand the importance of big reform of the courts, because this stuff is not getting any better. What's going to happen in 2030 is we're going to have another census, and there's going to be reapportionment after this census, and it's going to shift about 12 House seats from blue states into red states. You are going to see about 4 more seats added to Texas, and they're going to come away from California, away from New York. They're going to go to Arizona, and they're going to go to Florida, and they're going to go to Georgia and North Carolina and Texas. And that is going to add an additional 10 or 11 members of Congress from all of those states that are Republicans. And it's going to change the electoral college as well. the old way of doing this, right? If Kamala Harris was going to win in 2024, there was a pretty easy path. It was you hold the blue states, you hold the blue wall, you win the Omaha, Nebraska district, bingo, 270. But if you take 4 electoral votes away from California, 4 away from New York, 1 away from Minnesota, and you add those to Texas and to Florida, and states the Democrats aren't going to win, you have got a much tougher path. Suddenly you've got to win Arizona plus Georgia. Suddenly you have to win North Carolina. So there is some map expansion that has to happen. There's some work that has to happen in all of these states. 2030 is right around the corner. It's 5 years from now. We've got to be thinking about all of this right now, because the path to the White House is about to get dramatically tougher as well. So, and then when Democrats have a trifecta again, which I don't think will be anytime soon, but when it happens, we have to be ready and have built the public support for the kind of dramatic reform that this country needs to be put back on a path to multiracial democracy.
Well, what you're going to have to do, what I'd like to do is speak with you tomorrow or the next day so that you can lay that out. Because I think that we can't wait until 2028 or 2026 to start this work. This is something, it's like going to Sunday school. It's something you have to do every week, going to church every week. I mean, there's some things you have to do. You have to train and show people every single day, because we need to know what the ask ought to be when we're going to these town hall meetings. We need to be pressing our elected officials to look at these reforms, to say, hey, this is what I'm hearing. This is what we need. Because we don't even know what it is that we need to be asking for. And so I want you to come back, David Daly, and talk about that. Because I promise you, we have a lot to talk about with the Democrats heading to Illinois. And I promise you, they're going to be coming not too far from us, I think. And so we've got a lot of work to do, a lot. So everybody, in the next hour, we're going to be talking about Gaza just in next hour, next show. So get on over there. Gaza, they're weaponizing food. People are going to the stations, to the trucks to get the food. They're being shot and killed. Babies are dying of starvation. Mothers cannot breastfeed their children because they don't have enough nutrients. They have nothing to give. What are we doing? What are we doing? You saw Reagan with a phone call get things kind of on track in the Middle East. I mean, we used to be our governors, our government used to be able to do that. Our president used to be able to do that. They're not doing that now. So, I mean, who's in charge here? But I want to thank you, David Daly. Bring up that book, Rat F, one more time. Hold it for us. They're right there. There you go, everybody. That's right. And Attorney Daryl Jones. Thank you. Anti-democratic. Thank you very much. It's a trilogy, everybody. You got to get them. If you want to know what's going on here in the American body politic, you really need to read those books. And they read. It's a fun read. It's a fun read. It's a great read. Daryl Jones, of course, on WOL in DC at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday morning. Everybody, Tuesday afternoon, kind of. So go on and get on over there, everybody. Let's talk about Gaza. Let's talk about the weaponization of food. Let's talk about starvation. Let's talk about where this is going and how this can stop. The Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. God bless.